Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm going to be chatting a bit about how you can build an AI CRM. So before we get started, just want to run through some terms. So CRM is Customer Relationship Manager. So these are things like HubSpot, but they could be things like Excel or Airtable and things like that. So you want to manage maybe customer data or client data, and sort of what's your relationship with that. So I'm Brian. I'm working on using AI to prove mathematics. And I think so the overall goal for this is going to be so that at the end, all of you can build your own AI CRM for your own business. So a quick overview of what we're going to run through. So first, I'm going to talk about why I like these sort of custom CRMs versus maybe the off-the-shelf things like HubSpot. Second, I'm going to talk about how to structure data. Third, how to divide up workflows. Fourth, how to implement the code changes themselves once you figured out the overall design. And last, some sort of like tips and tricks, things to avoid. And I'm also going to run through a quick demo. So this all started about maybe 10, 11 months ago when I was trying to scale up, go to market and sale to my own company. And I was running into lots of different challenges, and I was finding out all the limitations of the existing software. And I thought, it'd be great if I can build these sort of custom sales automations to really supercharge our go to market. But HubSpot wanted to charge me about 45K a year. So I thought, this is quite pricey. I don't know, like as much as I love these like sales automations, I don't know if I love them that much. And I think also it's sort of there was like a broader set of problems, which is like the CRMs have lots of problems. So they're not that good, they're pretty expensive, and they're not customizable. And as well as that, they're not built for sort of the age of AI. And ultimately, I wanted some AI automation, but I also wanted to customize the software and centralize my data. And these are the kinds of things I wanted with AI automation. So things like I wanted to find new clients. Once I had these clients, I wanted to research them. I wanted to find their contact information. I wanted the ability to analyze communications, so things like emails and texts. I wanted AI to keep detailed notes on the client and also to send emails. And these are some examples of the kinds of workflows that I'm talking about. So, you might take a client, go research them, and then assess to the extent to which this is a good client to contact. We also have things like, I want to find the contact information, then write a cold email, and schedule a series of follow-ups over the next 2 months. Or I wanted to have it so that I can connect it into my email, and when I get an email, I analyze the email, and then I maybe take a series of steps. So maybe I update the status of the client, maybe I schedule an action in the future, so maybe a follow-up email. Maybe I store sort of key takeaways from that email, or I have 3 schedule actions. Clearly, I really wanted to schedule actions. Or as well as that, I thought it would be really useful to be able to customize and centralize my data. So things like adding custom features or custom fields, and centralizing the data source, and related to that, the ability to build AI agents. So AI agents perform best when all the data is easily accessible in one place, whereas if it's sort of scattered across Airtable and Excel and then Google Docs and so on, it's hard for the agent to access that data, and then as a result, it's hard for the agent to be very effective and to effectively work autonomously. And lastly, deeper integration. So like things I thought might be very interesting is like the ability to connect to my bank account and get sort of real-time analytics and sort of match up transactions to different customers and so on, instead of reconciling everything manually. So this is sort of a quick example of what the Microdoc CRM looks like. And a lot of the benefit of the CRM is actually in the background. So I haven't spent that much time on the user interface, but this is sort of like a high-level overview in that like you have like a dashboard, there's a place to analyze emails, you can view individual contacts and so on. But I think what would be really interesting is to sort of like build a repeatable process that everyone can use. So as sort of a case study, I'm going to be running like a quick consultation for the Edge team to show them how they can build their own AI CRM. This one is free, but the next one, you're going to have to negotiate. So broadly speaking, I think there's a 3-step plan that I found really effective. So the first is you want to decide on the data structures. The second is you want to plan out the workflows. And third, you want to use AI to implement. And there's been loads and loads of talks over the past 2 weeks on how to use AI to code. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it here. But like, I'll go into it later. But even like no-code tools or low-code tools are really effective as well. So a caveat before I get into it is that this approach like can be much more effective and much more powerful than building like using sort of a generic piece of software like HubSpot. But there are cons. So you introduce like risk of bugs. So if the software isn't working, there's an onus on you as the organization to figure out how to solve those bugs. There's also security things to be concerned about. So because you're now managing the data in-house, you don't want to leak a lot of like very sensitive, sponsorship information or whatever it is. And there's also added maintenance work and things like that, where if you want to evolve the platform or add features. So those are just the caveats at the top, but I found it good in my experience. So in the case of Edge, the thing you want to start with is, what data does your business deal with? So in the case of Edge, it might be, there's a series of Edge City events that happen throughout the year. There's also a series of Edge City locations. Maybe there's some participants, there's volunteers, sponsors. But as well as that, one sponsor might give many sponsorships. So maybe you want a separate way to manage, which sponsor corresponds to which like dollar amount. Maybe you want to keep track of correspondence and so on. So to start with, an AI can be really effective with this, to just ask you, I'm running this business called Edge or whatever it's called. I want you to ask me 20 clarifying questions about the business to help me figure out what data I deal with. And once you have this data, it can be helpful to visualize it in different ways. So this is using a mermaid diagram, but the idea is that you have this data, but also the data has relationships with each other. So for instance, like you have the sponsorship, but also maybe each sponsor, they might have multiple transactions. So you want a way to sort of map that relationship. But it also might be the case that a sponsor might be attached to a company. So for example, like an individual sponsor might be associated with Ethereum or Lisk and so on. So you want a way to manage that relationship. But also maybe a company is mapped to an individual person, and maybe that person is tied, the person is tied to a specific event or multiple events. So the idea is that you want to be very clear about what are the fundamental pieces of data in your business and how do they relate to each other. And I find that spending a lot of time at this stage helps you avoid a lot of headaches down the road. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's like just work with AI to figure this stuff out, and then think about the ways in which the data interacts. And AI can be really helpful for asking you good questions to help you extract what's in your head and put it down on the page. But also can be really good at suggesting things like, given what we know, did you think about this? Or, is it possible that like this relationship should be mapped in the database and so on? So once you have the data, you then move on to workflows. So what are the common things that your business does? So like, does it send out invoices, or does it manage, does it send out reminder emails, or does it send out, whatever it is. So like every business will be different. So this is why this sort of generic piece of software like HubSpot don't sort of perfectly match people's businesses, because they've designed for everyone. But think about, what is it that your business does on a day-to-day basis? So in the case of Edge, it might be, you want to send a thank you email to all the sponsors 2 weeks after Edge finishes. Or it's like you want to find a list of people that have like a list of Ethereum sponsors on LinkedIn, and you want to send them a customized, personalized cold email. And then you want to think about, okay, we have these, maybe it's 10, 15, 20 different workflows. You want to think about what are the common bits between each workflow. So in the previous example where we're sending emails, it might be the case that first we determine the audience. So, maybe we use the LinkedIn API, or we use the sponsor database, or we figure out some way to figure out like who we should be sending this email to. And the second stage is we write the email. So in the case of the reminder email or the thank you email, it might be like a template where you leave like a spot for their name to go. But in the second case, it might be AI writing the email. And in the third case, you send the email. So it might be in the future, it might be immediately, it might be a series of emails over time. But ultimately, like based on what we're talking about, like this sounds like we should build like a campaign manager or like an email campaign manager. And I think that like this sort of feature you build to generalize over the workflows that you want to have will depend case to case. So like an email manager might work here, but there's some caveats as well. So like some features are really not worth reinventing, and there's like really great businesses that like focus exclusively on the really hard bits. So for example, in the case of Microdoc, we use two features around our email sending. We use a thing called Warmbox, which sort of warms up our inbox so that when we send emails, we improve deliverability rates. We also use Zero Bounce, which checks the email that we're sending to make sure it's a valid email, so our email doesn't bounce, and we improve deliverability rates. And like it would be ridiculous to go try building these, because like those like require really, really hard infrastructure to build, and it's just not worth my time. That I think all businesses should focus on the thing that they're best at, and they shouldn't spend too much time on the things that like are not worth their time. I think in these cases, it's not worth reinventing those. And I think the way I sort of think about it is like sort of across two axes. Where like if there's a workflow that happens every single day, you should probably build a custom feature for that. So for example, if it's like adding a new sponsor to the database, you should probably just like add an add sponsor button instead of like buying an external service. But if it's the case that like it's a super complex thing that you use often, so for example, checking if an email is valid, you should probably use a third-party service for that. But if it's a really complex thing, and if it only happens once or it happens maybe 2 times a year, you should probably just build a one-off piece of code for that. I don't think it's worthwhile investing time to figure out how to build this into a really nice feature, when the reality is like you should just let the AI write the code itself. And then last, it's like if it doesn't happen that often and it's not very complex, you should probably just do it manually, or build a simple feature for that. So you have the data structures and you have the workflows. So what do you do next? So I think what can be really helpful, and this is something that I actually didn't do, but I wish I did in hindsight, was use an open source piece of software, like an open source CRM. That I tried to sort of reinvent everything from the ground up, and that was like a bad idea, because what ended up happening was like I just reinvent from first principles everything that was already in this software, and then looking back, I was like, why did I bother? Why did I put myself through that? So I think that that's one thing that can really be helpful as a starting point from you to build on. Other thing, like I mentioned before, is like try keep everything very, very simple and add complexity like naturally. So. Like similar to like the not reinventing the wheel, like start with sort of like very basic features and see how you can like put together your data in a way that makes sense for you, instead of like trying to make things too complex. As well as that, around making code changes, people have spoken a lot about this, but using platforms like Lovable or Replit can be good. Or if you're a bit more tech savvy, or if there are people on your team that are a bit more tech savvy, using things like Claude Code and Cursor and Codex Web can be really helpful to make code changes. In terms of hosting, I think hosting on something like Vercel can be very solid. Again, it's like you want to pick something that has no headaches. So Vercel provides a very like headache-free, streamless experience. And like there are ways to save like $2 each month with like a custom implementation, but the time it takes to set up and maintain is just not worth it. So I think the theme throughout this is just like you want to pick things that are sort of like the least headachy as possible. So yeah, I guess that's like a very sort of quick crash course on the workflow that I use to build the CRM. I can give a quick demo of the rough Edge CRM that I built, but I think that like it'd be most helpful if like people sort of drove the discussion as they see fit. So if there's like specific things that you're thinking about or like specific questions that you have, I'd love to hear them. So yeah, I'll do a very, very brief demo, and then we can move on to a couple of questions. So yeah, I guess this is sort of like a broad dashboard of, there's nothing in there yet, but the idea is that like you can populate things over time. So if it's the case, for example, that you wanted to add the ability to, use the LinkedIn API, you can, give the LinkedIn API, or you can give the AI agent, coding agent access to the LinkedIn API, and you can add a button that says, I want to pull in all the data from LinkedIn and so on. So the idea is that like, sort of really your imagination is the limit, and you're able to adapt this software over time as you see fit. So yeah, is there any questions or, yep?
The data structures, by the way, this is really useful, and I think more and more companies are going to be building their own systems that are fit for purpose. In terms of coming up with the data structures, do you think it's worth maybe using something like a no-code CRM builder just to figure out exactly what you're trying to do as a prototype before you move on to like determining the data structures, or can you just do that as you go with the AI tools and like adjust?
I think you can do it as you go and adjust. Like I'm even finding with my Microdoc CRM that it evolves over time depending on sort of the new challenges that come with each sort of level of the business. I guess that it can be really helpful to start and try get them as right as possible to begin with. So like if you find that no code helps you better visualize things, then I think that's a great idea. I often find that like even a pen and paper can be really good. So like even to just list out all the pieces of data that the business works with, and then sort of like write arrows between the things. So things like with Edge City, for example, there might be the case there's like Edge City Esmeralda, but that might happen every single year. So you want maybe one Edge City Esmeralda location, but then you want like multiple ways to reference that location from all the various events that happen over the years. And then AI can take care of a lot of that abstraction. So once you have the relationships and you have the data, AI is usually pretty good at picking out like how does this translate into code. So yeah.
I just follow-up question. Thank you. Do you also use systems built with AI for like intercompany communications, like instead of Slack? Because I feel like Slack, 90% of what they offer, what we don't need. We just need to chat to each other, and we need bots to be able to just notify us
Mm.
and to link it back to the database. Like, have you built anything like that as well?
I have built stuff with the Slack API. So there's sort of a Slack bot that has access to the CRM, so I'm able to ping that from Slack. I guess the thing I like about Slack is that I think again, like Slack is it does seem on the surface like it's a piece of software that like shouldn't be like it's probably not that worthwhile. But I think again it comes back to the headache question where like I like the ability to like have Slack on my phone, for example, and get notifications, and like to build all that infrastructure of like building an app and building a notification infrastructure would just be like a headache I don't want. So I think about like I try to be strategic about like, okay, is it like I don't want that headache, but is there a way I can like integrate this into the main workflow? And I find that like having good APIs where you can like plug into the LinkedIn API or plug into the Slack API and all bring it down to the same place means that once it's all in the same place, it's easy to action and to use that information. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. You mentioned at the beginning of the talk that it's better for agents if they have access to all the information in one place. And I've been building some agents that have, for example, access to some database which has dynamic data of the business. And they also have access to some kind of knowledge base where you have the rest of the information that it's not needed in the database. And usually it's a problem that some questions, I am talking about agents that attend customers, for example, like a customer service. Customers make questions and their correct answer is split between the information in the database and the information in the knowledge base. And usually this is a problem. This makes the responses to be very slow. What approach would you recommend for this kind of structure? Would you recommend to try to dump the information in the database in some kind of huge knowledge base, or maybe change the database, or is this just the way it is?
Yeah, I think there's probably like three things there. So I think the first is like around maybe four. So I think the first is like customer service versus like other kinds of AI automation. I think that customer service is like a uniquely tricky problem in some ways in that like it's essentially like a search problem, and in some ways it's like a time-sensitive search problem because maybe you have like a little pop-up like at the bottom of your website, and users can chat to it, and they don't want to wait 15 minutes for like a simple question. So I think from that perspective, I would generally use like external services for that. So I think that like that's a really hard problem to solve, and I'd use something like Intercom with their Fin AI agent instead of trying to build it in-house. But when it comes to sales, and particularly email, like the natural cadence of email is like it's quite slow. So like you wouldn't expect someone to respond within 15 seconds if they get an email. So I think in a similar way, it's like because you have that extra time, you can do deeper research. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing might be like, if it's the case that the data is split between your knowledge base and your main database, maybe I try design like guardrails around the AI so that like maybe it can only query data related to that organization or that user, so that like you prevent sort of data breaches. Or it might be the case that like you do find a way to sort of ingest the data to your knowledge database. What I find also really helpful is like to make them almost the same thing. So to just have like one, to let the agent choose like what it thinks is the appropriate place to look, and whether that is a structured set of documents or it is the main database, and they can sort of make that decision. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, if there's any other questions, or I can go through a quick sort of demo of how I think about maybe adding the LinkedIn automation to the Edge City CRM. But if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Yeah.
Do you also plug in something like an automation builder like N8N, or do you just do everything through AI in the back end of your CRM? Like you just don't bother with these external add-ons?
N8N it could be a good idea. I typically use sort of like background workers. So using something like BullMQ, for example, is like a type of back-end worker or background worker. And the idea is that like you can schedule these tasks throughout the day. And I guess the benefit of this, again, is like you keep everything in one place. So it's easier for the AI to work with those things. So yeah, I guess I can give a quick example of what that might look like. So I don't know if they're, hopefully LinkedIn has an API or that I can use it.
It's very difficult to do anything with the LinkedIn API.
Okay, maybe we shouldn't pick LinkedIn then.
Yeah, they're very strict, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so they might require me to like go through lots of loops. So let's build a sales email writer. So I might say something like and again, using something like a text-to-speech can be useful for this. So, I want to build a sales email writer. So the idea is that it will take context about the given prospect and write a detailed sales email based on what we know about them. I want you to research in the code base to find all relevant context and then report back with a plan. So yeah, that might be sort of a quick example of what that looks like. I think it'll work way in the background. So yeah, I think that in that case, while it's working away, unless there's any questions, I'll probably wrap up. Yep. I'm not too sure. So you mean like paying the $2,000 a month or whatever it is, or? Yeah, exactly. I haven't, but I think maybe they released a lower tier recently. Maybe not. Yeah. Is it more that you're looking to do posts, or you're looking to make queries to it? Yeah, I think I think it depends. So if it's the case that it might be the case that like you need to eat the cost in the beginning, but then if it's the case that like the $200 a month you spend on the API allows you to unlock, maybe it's like $1,000 extra per month of business you otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And maybe it's like in the first 3 months, it's losing money, but then after month 4, you make more money than you lose from the Twitter API.
This is 200. That's so interesting. Last time I checked, I thought it was like $2,000 or something. It was something really absurd. I mean, 200 is not that bad.
Yeah, I think they had to lower it because people were not very happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. So I think that's probably. That's probably all from me. Unless there's any other questions, I'll probably wrap up. So yeah, I hope you learned something about building an AI CRM, and I hope I convinced some people to try it out. I think maybe one last note on AI CRMs is that like it can be a big investment. So like you really want it to be sort of like a collaborative effort in your team, or like among the relevant people, because what can often happen is like when you're switching to a new tool or building a new tool, you can miss sort of like key features that mean that like, and the features might seem very trivial. It's like the ability to like print off a certain page or to generate a dashboard, but without those features that people don't want to come over. So keeping in mind like what are the sort of minimal, agreeing amongst you, what are the minimal viable set of things you need in the CRM in order to switch, and then building those things. So yeah. Excellent. Thanks so much. I really appreciate everyone coming, and